Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, March 29th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about why the Republican Party is making it harder to vote in key battleground states ahead of the 2022 midterm elections. Now, the reason why I am plainly saying the Republican Party and not trying to sugarcoat any part of the situation is because of the claims of President Trump that the 2020 election was rigged and what that meant for voters moving forward and what Republicans are proposing in certain battleground states. There are some states where we see some Democrats proposing things that aren't exactly, bills that are helping people vote. But the overwhelming majority of these bills that are being pushed are by Republicans and are drafted by the Republican Party. And the only ones that have been enacted by the GOP. And the reason why we are seeing this, making it a clear, concerted effort for the Republican Party to win future elections by making it harder to vote, it's very clear who they are targeting and what they are targeting in this scenario. Because what we are seeing is not only is it Georgia, not only is it Arizona and other states, but states where Republicans have supermajorities in state legislatures, where they may not be winning by supermajorities on the presidential level or on the Senate level or on the House level. For example, we have the state of Wisconsin, right? Let's take a look at Wisconsin's 2020 election results. Well, Wisconsin Republicans, besides the governor there being a Democrat, the Wisconsin Republicans can pass anything they want to in the state assembly. When you're looking at the districts there, they have been gerrymandered in such a way that in 2018, the Democratic Party won the popular vote, but lost the overall control of the legislature, with the Republicans in nearly a supermajority. I think it was 63 to 37. I can actually find the numbers right here. But it's honestly laughable that we have some of these state legislature elections that ultimately determine redistricting control, where it is just simply so unfair. And it makes people unable to actually have fair representation on the state and local level, not even, mentioning the gerrymandering in representative districts. It is something that is done by both Republicans and Democrats, but in this instance, what we are seeing now is in a direct response to Donald Trump losing the presidential election that Republicans are now up in arms about voting in the entire country. So here I have the numbers. In 2018 in Wisconsin, the Democrats won the popular vote here with 52.99% of the vote. Republicans got 44.75%. Despite that, the Democrats won 36 out of the 99 seats. The Republicans won 63 and decreased by 1 seat. Wow. That's insane to think about. But overall, what we are looking at here is not only Wisconsin, but a number of states where we have some of these bills that are potentially going to pass that are going to be prohibiting people from voting in heavy margins, disenfranchising people of color, disenfranchising economically disenfranchised communities. Plainly put, this is meant to restrict voters who lean towards the Democratic Party in almost every single way. And we'll talk about exactly what happened down in Georgia and why that matters. Because as Georgia has seen, this could very well be, I highlighted it down here, it could be a model for the rest of the country. And that's according to the officials with the Heritage Action for America. It's pretty much just the election integrity type of action committee that claims that the 2020 election was rigged. But Georgia just passed this bill, and I actually mentioned it in a previous video, and I talked about how what they did was essentially a target for black and brown voters, a target for poorer voters. It's honestly a very unfortunate reality that this has come to a point where not only will we see it in Georgia, this is the start of many, many more. This is the start of many, many more things that are going to happen, because this is completely going to disenfranchise millions upon millions of more voters, tens of millions of more voters, as we start to get through other states, including bigger states such as Texas and Florida, with large populations where Republicans have control of the legislature and have free reign in many ways. So let's go ahead and take a look at what exactly happened in Georgia and what that could mean, and why Republicans are doing this, and what this could mean for the election results in 2022, and how it could favor the GOP even more after these laws are passed. So this law was essentially restricting a number of things that were happening in the 2020 election. For example, they allowed people to get absentee ballots up until the Friday before the general election in 2020. Now you have to get it 11 days earlier. Before, you needed a signature. Now you need a copy of your driver's license, or you need a state-issued ID in order to vote absentee. You can't just submit it in the mail. It's not in an honor code at this point. And even though there's been no recorded cases of voter fraud, at least substantially, there have been 2 so far, both of which were Republican voters, might I add. Overall, Georgia found no evidence of voter fraud in the entire state. And this bill is just being passed simply to please Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Because after they lost, they realized that Democrats were mobilizing. The Democratic Party had a very tremendous effort in Georgia, with Stacey Abrams leading one of those efforts. And this bill makes things that you would never even dream about being illegal. So let's take a look. One of the main things is that there are new voter identification requirements for absentee ballots. Well, that disenfranchises voters who don't have the time to get an ID, don't have a license because they don't have a car. You see where this goes. There's a lot of issues as to why people can't just, why it prevents people from voting. If, normally they could just do a signature. Also, if they don't know about these updates, they might request it the Friday before, as it has been in all the elections, at least recently. And, 11 days before, this is something that probably won't be super well publicized amongst the entire state itself. I can guarantee you probably around 30 to 40% of this entire state doesn't even know that this bill had passed, because things that happen on the local and statewide level don't always get around as easy as the things that you might see on the mainstream media. But this was covered. But not everyone also, not everyone has the access to the mainstream media. It really just comes down to the Republican Party drastically changing the laws. And it gets even worse from here. Now state officials can take over local election boards. Rather than have the Secretary of State who's elected by the voters for this sole reason, the state legislature can replace whoever that is. Which right now means that Brad Raffensperger, if he was to oversee certain things, the Republicans can say, nope, we don't trust you because Donald Trump doesn't trust him. Or, statewide officials don't want Brad Raffensperger anymore. Previously, they had no control really over what he could do, but now they absolutely do, and they can replace him if needed. And then now we are seeing it is criminal to give voters food and water in lines. And we'll talk about why that is one of the most disenfranchising things you can do at this point, and how, if enacted in other states, will harm people in inner cities. And we all know the stereotype: cities vote for Democrats, the country votes for Republicans. And that is true. Urban voters lean to the left. So looking at, if this does become a model for the rest of the country, we are going to see a tremendous decrease in turnout, specifically in inner cities and areas with larger percentages of people of color. This is something that is a direct attack on people of color and poorer voters. Let's take a look at Georgia, for example. What this bill does is essentially, makes it harder for you to vote by absentee, less time. Also, I don't think they mentioned this in the article, but the runoff elections have been moved up to 4 weeks. Less time to campaign, less energy on both sides. Overall, I think that's a general negative for both parties. I don't know why they did it, but maybe it's just to follow up immediately after an election. I don't really know, right? But looking at what happened down in Georgia, for example, these voters that are being told, you can't get food and water in line, probably don't care if they're in Appling County or if they're in Montgomery County. These are counties where we see 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 votes countywide. You go to Fulton County, nearly, 500,000. No, more than that. 500,000 votes cast in this county alone. Well, in a traditional year, most people probably aren't voting by absentee. But the thing is, it's harder to vote by absentee, and therefore you're going to want to go into line. Well, once you get in line, when you realize that when you're given very similar resources as other counties with smaller populations, and you have to wait 5-6 hours, and it's criminal for someone to bring you a water bottle. It's a hot, Georgia afternoon. You're voting early, you're voting in person on election day, whatever it might be. You're waiting in line. And there are people out here, there's water, there's food, but nobody can give it to you. You have to wait those 6 hours, or you just leave the line, you don't vote. You just don't vote, right? And keep this in mind, what this also means is that because we are seeing it making it harder for people to vote by absentee, you also have to realize why this disenfranchises people that are working, lower class individuals. When you're looking at those who aren't exactly too well off, a lot of the times they're working 1, 2, 3 jobs. They don't exactly have the luxury the entire day to wait in that line. Sometimes they can only go on their lunch break. Well, if they made it harder for people to vote, by mail, and people have to vote in person, you're just going to say it's just one vote. Why does it matter? Well, when that happens on a 10, 100,000 scale, you can see exactly why the Republican Party is enacting this, because it's very clear what their intentions are. They're hitting every single point that makes it harder for people to vote. They're making the lines longer. They're making it harder to vote by mail. They're making it illegal for someone to give you food and water. It's not as if they're saying, here's a water bottle, go vote for Biden. That's not what happens. This is simply people giving water bottles because people are sweating in these lines, because they wrap around, because American democracy has come to a point where we applaud long lines for whatever reason. But we are looking at, yes, I think that it is great to see more and more people voting, but this only disenfranchises them. What we see enacting right now in Georgia is a intentional hit towards mainly minority areas and larger counties, inner city areas within the Atlanta area, or even, other cities or towns. I guess you could argue, yes, cities, Savannah, Augusta, Athens, huge college areas. When people don't have the time to vote, they're simply not going to vote. And since most, employers don't give people the day off to vote, they just might not do it because it's harder to vote by mail. They literally cannot afford to wait in line. So what happens? They just simply don't vote. They might have voted in 2020. Now they can't. And what this does is, if this truly is a model, which it looks like it's going to be on the nationwide level, we are going to see what happens. This is a start in Georgia that's going to sweep across the country. You see all of these red dots. These are restrictive voting bills sponsored by Republicans. A few Democratic ones, one in Pennsylvania, two in New York. But overall, the general consensus here is that it's red all across the country. Almost every single state is seeing restrictive voting bills from the Republican Party, with very few exceptions. Almost every single state. And the reason why this is so important is because I think the Republican Party is scared for 2022. Because Trump caused this, and the American voters did not have a positive reception to Donald Trump as he left office, and they don't have a positive reception of him currently. Joe Biden just won the 2020 election, and Americans have a positive reception of Joe Biden. They have a more positive approval rating of the Democratic Party than they do the Republican Party. And when you're looking at the 2022 elections that are up, the Republicans seem to be scared about what 2022 could give them. Because right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be a red wave year. At this point in time in 2017, people were arguing that it was going to be a blue wave year in 2018. They were right. People made the same argument, not necessarily in 2009, but in 2013, we started to see, yes, the Democrats were ahead in the generic ballot, but we knew that would change, as we saw happen in 2010. And while that may happen now, I think the Republican Party is truly scared because of the pandemic, because it has made this year, 2022, when I say this year, like no other. Joe Biden is going to enjoy the benefits of a recovered economy, of a pandemic eradicated in the country, herd immunity reached. With over 140 million shots administered already, he is doing well in terms of vaccine distribution. All of this seems to be worrying the GOP. After they lost in Georgia, they knew they needed to do something to prevent those voters from voting. And when I say those voters, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Republicans in Georgia are targeting black voters. They're targeting voters that don't have the luxury, don't have the time to vote and wait in 6-7 hour lines. These laws don't affect rural counties, at least as much as they do urban counties. And it's very telling as to why. Rural counties vote red. Urban counties vote blue. Each county needs to have different standards here, but this is just sweeping across the state, making it harder, intentionally harder, for certain areas to vote. And what this could do, on the Senate map at least, is make it a lot harder for people of color to vote in cities, make it a lot harder for just anyone really, and ultimately drive the country to the right. Because we know the group that votes at the highest rate are white voters, older voters. These are voters, wealthier voters. As you move up and up and up, with a few exceptions at the top 1%, as you move up and up and up, white voters are the only race demographic group that backs the Republican Party. Older voters, the only age group that backs the Republican Party, at least from the 2020 election. Up until around age 50, every single one of those demographic groups voted for the Democratic Party, voted for Joe Biden. Richer voters back the Republican Party. So what we're seeing here is that this is a target to potentially make it more difficult for Democrats to retain Arizona in their column, retain Georgia, potentially lose New Hampshire, lose Nevada, because these races will be decided by just a few percentage points. And if voters in inner cities are prevented from voting in, large fashions, what that is going to do is make it more difficult for Democrats to win. And Republicans recognize that. While it may seem like it's only impacting 1, 2, 3% of the electorate, look what that could have done in Georgia and Arizona in the 2020 election, or Nevada, which was decided by 2.4%. In 2022, New Hampshire could flip under this scenario. And it's not just the Senate elections that could be impacted. We could see Kansas go back to the Republican Party. The voters in Milwaukee no longer are able to vote if the Wisconsin legislature passes something like this. Those in Detroit, those in Philadelphia, Georgia stays red. Nevada could go red. Maine could return back to the red column. Potentially Minnesota. I mean, the possibilities are endless because they have free reign in a lot of these states, even in Minnesota, which actually just switched to Republican control statewide. So what we're seeing here is not only will it impact the Senate elections, which will have national implications, it will impact local elections and make it easier for more and more of these laws to be passed. Because right now they're being passed by the legislatures, which will prevent Democrats from winning statewide, prevent them from winning in state assembly races, prevent them from winning control of state legislatures, prevent them from winning on the presidential level. It's just going to continue the self-reinforcing cycle where voters are disenfranchised, Republicans win, they disenfranchise the voters are disenfranchised, Republicans win, they disenfranchise the voters. Someone needs to break, and it's not going to be the GOP because they started this cycle. They started it after Donald Trump lost the election. They are looking for a 2012 or 2016 election win. They are looking for a House map where the Democrats are below 200. They are looking to make it so the GOP can win elections in the future by making it harder for voters that are more likely to vote for the Democrats to vote. And while you won't see this come out straight from the mouth of the Republican Party, I'm here to tell you and show you exactly what I'm seeing. I certainly love to stay apolitical on this channel, and I really have tried to in this video, but it is very clear what at least I am seeing from these laws, because it's not the Democratic Party that is proposing these. It's the Republican Party. It's only the Republican Party that has passed these. It's only the Republican Party that claimed the election was rigged, which prompted these laws. So what we're seeing is that the GOP is making it more difficult to vote because they want to have victories like the one in 2016. They want to win back control of the Senate, and they want to win more governorships. They want to win more statewide races. And if they do that, they will be able to create more and more of these laws, which will harm the ability for certain groups to vote. And it just so happens, coincidentally in quotes, that these voters back the Democratic Party at a much higher rate than the Republicans. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my post-2020 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.